Chat moderators are volunteers for digital extremes. As such, they're expected to represent and uphold the standards established by the company. That said, any behavior in-game or on the official Warframe forums, personal social media accounts, websites, and/or anywhere digital extremes and Warframe is concerned should heed to the code of conduct. If violated, warnings will be issued, and repeat offenders will be removed from the program. I know what the majority of you are probably thinking. Oh look, this retard is probably going to complain about Vauban again. Trust me when I say this video has nothing to do with Vauban. It may be surprising to you, but it's true. For the rest of this video, I'm not even going to mention him. Anyways, I'm sure you're all very aware of how badly managed and run our chat moderator program is. 2 of our chat moderators have already left the program, thankfully. But the program itself remains the same. Who really cares, right? Well, what would you say if I told you that not even DE themselves know what the fuck is going on with their own moderators? Or at least, they don't care. Given that chat moderators and others have gotten away with things including, but not limited to, emotional extortion, selling copyrighted material without permission, nepotism, abuse of authority without repercussion, developer-linked favoritism, and other shit. Do I have your attention now? See, the problems with our chat moderators are not immediately obvious, because ever since their names have become synonymous with cancer, our colourful cast of characters have been going out of their way to remove as much evidence of their misdeeds as possible, presumably to save face and/or wait for people to forget this ever happened. However, it does not matter what any of them tell you or what DE tells you. Much like the guides of the Lotus program, the chat moderator program is a failure kept on life support by DE, who consistently refuses to admit both programs have problems. This isn't something that just appeared out of nowhere. They're a problem that was started and keeps being perpetuated by DE's insistence of refusing to admit they made a mistake. What makes me qualified to say these things with certainty? Well then, sit down, grab some popcorn, and listen. Let's begin with the easiest case, Telluric. Telluric was the first chat moderator to have, thankfully, left the program due to concerns over mental health, despite the fact that he was arguably the most unqualified chat moderator we have ever had. Just so you understand what kind of person we're talking about here, this is a guy who essentially had a mental breakdown on Twitter after leaving the program he chose to be a part of in the first place. This is a guy who outright said he cares more about punishing people than actually playing the game. This is a guy who silenced and ridiculed anyone who in the slightest degree said something he didn't agree with. This is a guy who, despite having a job and being a toxic piece of shit online, resorts to pulling the victim card on Tumblr on multiple occasions. And trust me, this was brought up on Tumblr by people who know Telluric. This was mentioned not once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times. I'm not joking when I say that there's an entire essay detailing all the horrible things Telluric has done to people who made the mistake of trusting him. Such as refusing to pay back $4,000 that was given to Telluric to help him get back on his feet. He's asked for people to pay for his cat's surgery, buy him a car, and to pay off a parking ticket. There's a lot of shit Telluric has done. If you want to read his shit show for yourself, go to the link on the description below. If that's not enough for you, Telluric had the balls to start selling Warframe licensed material without any knowledge from DE themselves. Although DE, Danielle, has been blamed for all this chat moderator nonsense because she technically runs the guides of the Lotus program, DE entirely is to blame, not just Danielle. How do I know this? I asked DE myself.
Out of curiosity, has Telluric gained Dee's permission to sell this?
Hey Rahetalius. I'll be honest, I'm not sure if we have any official merch available on Redbubble. I'll send this on to the team. Thanks.
Quick question, I know that Danielle is in charge of the guides of the Lotus program, but is she also in charge of the chat moderator program?
Hi Rahetalius, sorry for the delay, the studio was closed yesterday. Given the care needed to run something like the chat moderator program, it really is a team effort, it doesn't rest solely on any one staff member's shoulders. Oh, and as for the Redbubble site, any officially supported Warframe merch will be available only on store.warframe.com or on sites that we have publicly partnered with, IAM8BIT, FanForge, etc. If you see Warframe stuff on sites like Teespring, etc., it's safe to assume that it's not officially licensed.
That itself goes against the code of conduct, by the way. This was allowed to happen by DE for the past who knows how many years Telluric was a chat moderator, even though the code of conduct should have seen him be removed from his position long ago. How ironic is it that those who supposedly fight toxic assholes are themselves toxic assholes? Then again, the entire social justice warrior culture is nothing more than people who have spent too much time on Tumblr and Twitter to actually know what the difference is between fighting for free speech and fighting for the rights to silence opinions you don't like. And by the way, the term political correctness, which people like Telluric love to campaign for, was coined in a communist text known as the Little Red Book, written by a guy who you may know as Chairman Mao Zedong. In case that name doesn't ring a bell, he was the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, and he was the guy who led the Chinese Cultural Revolution and Chinese Civil War back in the 1900s, which killed millions of people and resulted in the destruction of countless religious and historical sites and relics. So, yeah. Speaking of Chairman Mao...
Sure, Telluric and Server have direct ties with DE, but, you know, at least Missandris doesn't.
We're in Cetus right now with some lovely friends, Corial and Misan.
It's a lost cause, man. Her freaking pet was named Chairman Mao, for f***'s sake. Okay.
Now we have friend-zoning misandrist, now known as Missan, now also known as Nervous Trash Cat, also known as how many times do I have to change my name until everyone forgets about me? Although not as insane as Telluric, Missan is a bit of an enforcer of what we call the double standard. Since Missan was publicly against the Nether is a trap meme and Rule 63 Warframe art, yet she has absolutely no problem unironically posting both on her Tumblr. She also leaked Valka Prime before it launched, which also goes against the moderator code of conduct, FYI. Even though she's friends with DE staff, they refuse to refer to her by her old name.
Clap, 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 clap. Oh, I love when Equinox claps. Do it again. Oh, friend zoning.
You invited that person.
We didn't.
I didn't. Because I was typing every name I invited.
I love that they're Sentinel matches. Like, it's amazing.
See?
It's curious, if you think about it. It's almost as if DE acknowledges how uncomfortable it is to say her name. The chat moderator program was and still is to this day a joke. How do you expect Warframe's reputation to flourish? We've already been noticed by the media, so who's to say things won't get worse in the future? We're being moderated by people who taunt or threaten anyone who does anything they don't like. What are we supposed to do? Talk about the moderators on the forums that is actively censored? Report the moderators to DE, who have done nothing to fix things besides hire somebody who's friendly with them? Let the record also show that DE Bear, formerly known as Silverbones, has been public for a long time now about his friendship with Telluric and other chat moderators. Bear was chosen by DE to supervise the chat moderators, and from a logical perspective, this makes no sense. Hiring somebody who's friends with the people he's supposed to oversee is nepotism at its finest, which in the real business world causes problems, but here in Warframe, there's obviously going to be bias. So what's the point? Telluric is living proof that DE doesn't actually look into their volunteer applicants, let alone look up whatever potentially obnoxious or repugnant things they say on their social media, even though that's literally part of DE's own moderator code of conduct. Speaking of being obnoxious, we also have Shadow, the second chat moderator who has left the program. He's pretty irrelevant at this point, mostly because nobody knows who the fuck he is or was. But the only reason I even mention him is because he's a believer of the idea that, if it's not in Warframe, I can say whatever I want as a moderator, which obviously isn't the case.
Remember that one Angry Gamer article? Well, Shadow knew to end this tirade, he had to go to the source and weather the storm all by himself. One man alone to turn the tide in all the chat moderators' favor, as he himself is one. Or should I say was one? Because I don't see how this is going to age well for him. This first one comes across like the beginning of an anime, so allow me to read the words of Shadow-san Senpai, master of the blade and keyboard. This is my first account, by the way. I'm Shadow, the Warframe chat mod. I only signed on to comment how childish you all seem, while getting to relish the fact that I don't have to use the same etiquette and decorum that I do when actually moderating. It's really head-scratchingly stupid, like children whining that they don't get to eat paste. Me? Oversensitive? I was brought on to deal with the shit stains that inhabit region alongside the cool people. If people want to leave because they can't be as much of an as they can be somewhere else, then good f***ing riddance. I'll shed no tears. But we're not in Warframe region chat, so that means I can be as big as an as I want to be, which is great, because I feel constrained not being able to use my regular vernacular whenever I'm moderating. Ooh, nice fedora on that one. And sure, you can tell people to tough up all you want, but the fact of the matter is that some things just bother people. I get that. I don't know why other people don't, but whatever. The word, whoa, no, hard R. He went full on hard R.
Honestly, the only two explanations, besides just not caring, as to why DE has done little to nothing to fix their chat moderator problem is that they either don't want to risk potentially upsetting the Tumblr crowd, even though the developers of Guild Wars 2 had no problems firing employees who acted out of line on Twitter, or they're deliberately not mentioning their chat moderators in hopes that everything will just blow over. For those wondering, moderators get their positions by being promoted from the guys of the Lotus program. So if you're wondering where or how our chat moderators got to where they are, DE Danielle's program is your answer. Now, I know what you're thinking. DE shouldn't care what their volunteers do or say outside of the game. If it's not in Warframe, it's outside of DE's jurisdiction. Well, not only would that also go against the moderator code of conduct, but that would make the decision against Fosternator make no sense. For those not aware, Fosternator was a former guide of the Lotus who was kicked from the program by DE Danielle for being part of a politically related conversation that led to insulting community members on Twitter, without any opportunity to defend himself or at least have a talk with DE before losing his position.
I woke up and I have a message on Discord from DE Danielle telling me, and you guys can probably see her on the screen, telling me that I have been kicked from the Guides of Lotus. And if you guys don't know what the Guides of Lotus are, they are this community that DE picks out these certain players through an application process very similar to getting a job. They pick certain players to help old and new players with the game and teach them things and generally not moderate. Keep everyone in the know, help everyone they can. And that's sort of what a Guide of Lotus is. If you've ever seen the sigil on people's chests or you've seen those fancy shoulders, then you know what I'm talking about. So if you guys don't know, I was one of those, or am. I'll get to that in a second. I was one of those, and I did a darn good job. But I got a message yesterday telling me that I had insulted a community member. After I had read the message, I was not able to reply because I was kicked out of this special chat for guides on Discord, and without the ability to reply back, I was sitting there like, what do I do? Because I can't get in contact with Danielle. A little bit later, I did in fact get a message, a DM on Twitter. And so with this message, she had told me the same exact things, and she had mentioned later after that as well that, oh yes, and I forgot to mention, you know, we left this message on the forum for you, but I didn't put that in the main message. No, that isn't important. You shouldn't be allowed to defend yourself. So I go over to the forums, and my forum message box here, and I tell her, I ask, ooh, so what happened? What's happening? Because I honestly had no idea, because I don't take my Twitter beefs and my everything else into Warframe when I'm doing the Guide of the Lotus thing. I always keep those two things separate, because I like to be incredibly nice to new players and all that, and that's the whole point. So basically, this message was, I can ask questions about why I've been kicked out, but I can't defend myself from getting kicked out, because they immediately had kicked me out of the Guide to the Lotus.
This matters because moderators don't just proof in or out of nothing. They come from the Guides of the Lotus program, which, as we all know, is a failure as well, because the only real way to get into the Guides of the Lotus program is to have friends who already guides recommend you. From then on, you have a chance to become a moderator. But nepotism doesn't exist in Warframe. That's just rumors. Okay then, in that case, please explain to me how Telluric just casually mentions going on a date with D.E. Danielle on his Tumblr. Please explain to me how it is that Server and Telluric, both of whom formerly dated each other, managed to both end up being guides on the Lotus and chat moderators. Get back to me when you can answer that one. Whether you like it or not, favoritism exists in Warframe. Let me bring up a recent example. This is Ashisogi Tenno, another Warframe content creator who has already been around slightly longer than I have, yet his audience is 2 times larger than mine. The biggest difference between the both of us is that he is not a Warframe partner, not because he hasn't applied, but because he hasn't been accepted. Is it because he doesn't meet the requirements? No. He himself indicated that he meets all of them, yet his application denial has been unexplained.
I mean, what the hell? He's been talking about Warframe for like the whole fucking 3 years of his YouTube career, and even tattooed his channel logo, with a freaking Warframe logo on it. Now that's dedication, not only to the game, but to his community in general.
It really is a mystery why Jizo isn't a partner yet. I mean, the guy's channel is freaking huge, his Discord is exploding, his community is super active, and he makes really positive videos. The fact I got partnered before him is actually a really big mystery to me, because honestly, I always figured he would be partnered way before I did. I really couldn't begin to guess why DE doesn't want to partner him at this point. The worst part is that they don't tell him why he's not getting accepted. It's just the usual "please try again later" letter. Maybe it's because of his upload schedule, maybe it's because of his auto voice videos, I don't know. We have no idea, and DE doesn't want to tell us anything regarding why. All I really know at this point is that if Jizo still really wants to be a partner, he's going to have to jump through some kind of loop, because at this rate, he's going to need to have YouTubers either shout him out, give him some kind of like referral links or something, because he's definitely reached the criteria to be a partner at least 6 times over at this rate.
Long before we had the partner program, we had the fan channel program, which had a lot more relaxed requirements, given that I was accepted to it back in 2006, when I didn't even have 500 subscribers. Time goes on, and eventually DE decided to replace the fan channel program with the partner program. Everyone who was a channel fan, including myself, was transferred over to the partner program without a problem. In case you didn't know, I left the partner program twice. The first time was when I posted my I Quit video, and the second time was when I requested to be removed because I was leaving for Navy basic training. Despite that, I was accepted almost immediately after I reapplied both times. Not only that, but back in 2018, my channel took an almost 6-month-long hiatus due to being deployed, and yet I was never removed or contracted by DE for being inactive. Keep in mind, I've uploaded plenty of videos where I've either bashed DE or some aspect of the game that they have made. Despite that, do you know how many times DE has directly responded to me? Once. That was when I uploaded my Failures of Warframe video on the Guides of the Lotus. And for those of you who are convinced that I'm just some toxic, salty Vauban player, Let me just say that when it comes to behavior, I'm not the worst Warframe partner. Not by a long shot.
So let's take a look at this dumbassery over here. When I was a mission in Hello Hotfix and it's wave 31 and it's 2 minutes to restart, dumbass bitch. You dumbass bitch. You don't actually have to fucking leave for a hotfix. Bitch, are you stupid? Sounds like you're stupid to me, because you can actually stay in that mission. You don't have to leave the mission just because a hotfix comes in. Sounds like you're new here. You might want to fucking learn. I always end up losing all of my progress. No bugs because you don't really explore the game. Bitch, you want to see no bugs because I don't explore the game? You fucking dumbass piece of shit. Let's take a look right here. Let's take a look at these stats. What are your stats in the game? Because I've got 5.34K hours in the game. No bugs. I didn't say no bugs. There were bugs. But bitch, far less bugs than many of the AAA titles that are currently out there right now. Listen, DE is the kind of group of people that want to work on their builds. You know why? Why? You dumb piece of shit. And we need to talk about some other things.
Despite all of that, Ashisogi Tenno has not once been accepted to the partner program, for reasons that have yet to be explained. And for the record, let me say this. Ashisogi Tenno is not my friend. I don't watch his content, and I don't care what he does with his channel. He himself has reached out to me, and I politely asked him to fuck off. I just think it's ridiculous for a channel such as his to be repeatedly rejected from the partner program without explanation, despite the fact that I myself have left and rejoined the program twice, even though my audience is smaller than his and my content isn't exactly friendly towards DE most of the time. I know what you're thinking. What does the Warframe Discord have to do with any of this? More than you think, actually. This requires some explanation. The Warframe Discord was founded a long time ago by a fellow named Rednuka. Rednuka was convinced to hand off his ownership of the Discord to a user by the name of Tobiah. But before that could be done, Rednuka made the decision to temporarily give Discord ownership to Tobiah as a testing period. Tobiah has since then gone on to abuse his position as the owner of the most popular Warframe-related Discord, going so far as insulting his own staff and claiming that he hasn't taken over the Discord. Tobiah is both a senior guide of the Lotus and the owner of the Warframe Community Discord, which is the largest Warframe-related Discord server that exists. He has several add-ons on the Warframe Discord, such as bots and other types of commands, which supposedly cost him quite a bit, which is why he's opened a Patreon page for the Warframe Discord to cover some of the costs. However, being in charge of the largest Warframe Discord server that exists does have its benefits. So what does he do? He probably collects user data and uses it for his own personal use. Every message, image, and video that you send on Discord is logged and can be looked at any time by both him and the moderation staff. He invents the rules on the spot to moderate the Discord, even though he says he follows the Discord set rules that are listed. When people go to the Warframe subreddit to complain, Reddit mods state the following. It's technically true that whatever the Warframe Discord staff does is irrelevant to Warframe Reddit staff, but it cannot be overlooked that regardless of whatever petty or minuscule acts committed by Tobiah or any other Discord mod are, it's still something that affects the community. What do you think happens when a chat moderator does something shitty in-game? It gets recorded, and whoever happens to be affected complains to other people or on the subreddit, which in turn spreads awareness of whatever shitty thing was done. The same thing can be said for the Warframe Discord. Just because it's not a DE officially endorsed place of discussion like the subreddit or forums doesn't mean it's irrelevant. That would be like saying that the Warframe subreddit is a useless place for discussion just because it's not moderated by DE staff. Keep in mind, everything on this Discord is not sanctioned by DE. The Warframe Discord is not an official one from DE, thus it is entirely under Tobiah's jurisdiction, and whoever he picks as moderators for his server. Although DE employees are members of the Discord, they do not officially sanction the Discord. However, Do you want to know who he has on his Discord moderator roster? Yeah, he only accepts friends or people who kiss his ass. Once on the staff team, if you do anything that goes against him, he marks you as a criminal, and while he cannot demote you on that alone, he treats you like you are beneath him and don't contribute anything to the team. However, if you keep kissing his ass, then you're basically untouchable, even if you do something that would result in punishment or demotion that should normally be given. Why is Tobiah even a guide on the Lotus? Is it just because he owns the largest Warframe Discord? According to Telluric, yes. I honestly feel terrible for having endorsed this place. Don't get me wrong, I've met and interacted with a lot of wonderful players, but this isn't a Discord server you should be a part of. If anything, the Warframe Discord is a place I would advise you and everyone else to stay far, far away from. Not just because of what goes on behind the scenes, but because the Discord owner himself does whatever he wants with no repercussion. Because again, it's not an official Warframe Discord by DE. At the end of the day, this is what we had and have as guides and moderators. An edgelord, a social justice psychopath, an asshole, an identity-shifting tumble arena, a man-child, and at the root of it all, DE themselves. Keep in mind that DE Danielle is in charge of the guides of the Lotus program, where moderators originally come from. So by doing nothing about our chat moderators, she essentially started the problem, which is being perpetuated by DE's lack of action. There have also been cases against DE Danielle for banning people whenever she pleases for whatever reasons she decides. So that's something else to keep in mind. Assuming that DE is watching this video right now, there's 3 things you need to do in order to fix everything and make the player base happy. It's incredibly simple, trust me. Step 1. Remove Server and Missan from their chat moderator positions. As has been shown with Telluric's actions, none of these people are fit or even good choices to be chat moderators. Given that they themselves believe they can decide what is and isn't alright to say, when that's up to DE to decide, not them. You already have a third party assisting you with chat moderation, so removing 2 chat moderators shouldn't matter. There's absolutely no excuse to keep them around after what they've done. Telluric and Shadow have at the very least had the decency to step away from the chat moderator program. Meanwhile, Missan has been changing usernames in hopes that people will just forget about her. And Server has, for the most part, stopped being an asshole. With that in mind, stripping both of them of their moderator privileges and roles is all that matters. I could care less if they get banned or not. All that matters is that they have their moderator position removed. Step 2. Cut off your affiliation with the Warframe Discord. Epic Games is already wandering into the realm of legal problems, and there's no reason for DE to follow. It's obvious that Tobiah's not going to stop what he's doing, given that he's been at it for years now. But the very minimum that can be done is for DE to cut all ties and affiliation with the Warframe Discord. This type of activity from a senior guide of the Lotus is unacceptable. According to you, guides are supposed to be role models. If this is your definition of a role model, I'm incredibly disappointed. Step 3. Get rid of the guides of the Lotus program. The majority of the players have absolutely no clue what guides even do or where to find them. Nothing of value would be lost by getting rid of the program entirely, except the feelings of those who joined only for the feeling of being part of an exclusive club. Plus, it's already been beaten to death why nobody can take guides seriously. So you aren't really losing anything by disbanding the program entirely. If having a volunteer-based program is really important to you, then all you have to do is purge every single guide you have. Rebrand the Guides of the Lotus program to Guides of the Lotus 2.0 or something else, and start fresh. Starting fresh is important, because if you bring back everyone who was part of the old program, you're basically bringing back the same old problems. That's all that needs to be said. I love this game, I really do. It's just that seeing things be managed this way is disheartening. Given that all you've done so far with every update on the chat moderators is just acknowledge there's an issue or say you're changing things, despite the fact that you haven't punished or even mentioned Server, Mishan, or Telluric. So far, you've just given us as the players the impression that you don't even want to mention the elephant in the room. And if you absolutely, seriously, 100% want to show that you care about what the players think and say, you're going to have to at some point. Actions speak louder than words, after all. Thank you for watching.